All right, so let's turn to more of we'll talk process, I guess, civil procedure, or what happens in the state of Alabama. So I'll be your client. I'm sitting in your office, and I say, my girlfriend won't let me see our child.
Well,
what's the process look like?
I have what I call the talk with them first. I tell people up front, everything that show me is going to be attorney-client privilege. You know, there's some urban myths out there that, do I have to pay you $1 before you do that? No, you're consulting with me as an attorney. I've made sure there's no conflicts with your case before I consult with you. And we have the talk, and I ask hard questions, and I tell them up front, the number one thing is, if you lie to me about anything, you're giving me grounds to not help you withdraw from your case or anything. I can deal or help you deal with whatever. I can't guarantee you that things are going to go well, but I can at least give you a truthful synopsis of where I believe your case may go. And then I ask hard questions, you know, domestic violence, control, things like that. Who's there with the child? What's the work schedules? Have you lived in the same house? Did you welcome the child into your household? Have y'all held out to the community that you are the child, even if you're the child's father, even if you're not married? Okay, who are those witnesses? Who's going to get on the stand and tell the truth that, yes, you know, you've been little Johnny's dad the whole time and brought him out and showed him to everybody. I went to the first birthday party, all those type of factors, right? Mm-hmm. And then the next question that may be odd, but it's something that I think is important. I asked them if there's any chance to reconcile, and they're like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, and I asked them if I can give them a personal story about it. And I say, look, my wife and I married 22 years. You know, we were thinking of divorce at the 10-year mark. You know, we'd each made some mistakes and had hurt each other, and we chose to go work on our marriage. And it takes both people being 100% invested. But there are some tools out there and people I can direct you to that may be able to help you. And I'm happy to say we've actually had some success with that. It's not the majority, but, you know, we hope we can build on it. And if it's not the case, well, it's okay. Well, how can we co-parent? Well, what are the things that you see positive in your baby's mother that that you think she does well? What do you think are some things that you do well? And then you try and start getting in that mindset of co-parenting. Well, if you got a co-parent, well, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Okay, she might be angry right now, but on other things, is she generally a reasonable person? And regardless of gender, I mean, we're talking about fathers here, but that's the talk that I go through with folks. And it's about calming them down because they're already stressed. They're already upset. I mean, this is likely one of the most emotional times in their life. So they need to know that, okay, this is just a conversation. I'm walking through this because they've lived their life. I have to learn it, you know? So I'd be asking you these things, all these questions, and it's amazing how truthful people will be with you when you give them that chance to feel like they're a human being. And then I just answer them honestly. What do you think my chances are? You know, well, okay, primary caregiving. Who's been doing that? What will it look like in the future? What was your plan prior to y'all splitting up? And you go from there. And I'll give you an encouraging thing we had happen recent. This is very recent, actually. The couple's going for a modification. Let's just say there's challenges on both sides. We actually have a joint physical custody agreement with a school-age child where they live more than 60 miles apart. It was kind of amazing how we pulled it off between splitting time on weekends, making up times for in the summer and things like that. But it really was almost a 50-50 split on time without putting a strain on the child. It took some work. The opposing counsel that I had was amazing on it, working with me to get it worked out. And these were people who were very combative when they came in, very combative. Both had some legitimate reasons on both sides. But it was wonderful to see the father and the mother to work together to get that done. And even the judge was impressed that we got that done. But it took everybody working together. It was not done. It was done over a matter of months, if you can imagine.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a couple points there. Number one is that attorney-client privilege statement. Yes. In California, I forget the exact phrasing, but as long as you're legitimately inquiring about hiring an attorney and you're not just doing it to conflict them out,
yes,
then everything that's said in there does not leave that room. And the worst thing you can possibly do is lie to your attorney or try to cover up facts.
I have to explain in my contract, when people sign a contract with me, I actually have that in bold. My contract is like a page and a third, double spaced, like Times New Roman 12. And the funny part is it's actually in there in bold that if you deceive me in any way on a matter, it gives me the grounds to withdraw, and you recognize this. And people are like, oh, wow, you were serious about that. And I just smile, and they said, oh, that's happened before. And I just smile, and I'm like, there's reasons for everything in my contract. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and here's the thing too, is as attorneys, we hear and see all sorts of different situations.
Yes.
We can usually manage bad facts, whether it be we use the 8 Mile method and we put it out there first to take the sting off of it, or we put it into context. But we can't do anything about bad facts if opposing counsel brings them up at a hearing. And we look over at you and are like, what did they just say?
Yeah, the biggest thing on that, and that is a brilliant point you bring up. Being honest with your attorney is the first step for the truth coming out in front of a judge. Judges are pretty savvy. This isn't their first rodeo. The more truthful you are with the judge and being realistic about plans for the children, what you have lined up, the support system you have, what resources you bring to bear for the child, even the fact that, okay, I realize I've even had people say this on the stand, and they meant it as far as I've ever known, that yes, I know my ex-spouse or my ex-girlfriend did wrong when they did X, Y, or Z. And, I've forgiven them for it. It's not going to allow us to be together, but we need to co-parent. We need to co-parent for our child. That's still the mother of my children. Mm-hmm. And when you see that from a person who in their actions and in their words have meant it, that goes an incredibly long way. So just learning the fact that, okay, the other person might not be your mate, but that child that you created, you got to view that child as having the best of both of you.
Yeah. And another piece on that is, I mean, we both have clients who if they say something, we know they mean it and we know they're 100% truthful. Yes. We also have clients that can be dodgy around uncomfortable facts. Yes. And if I go into court with that client that I know, if they tell me in the hallway, this never happened, they don't have any proof of this, they're making this up, I feel more comfortable saying that with conviction to the judge that this is the truth. Where if I know someone's being dodgy or they want to be indirect with their comments, indirect with what they're telling me, I'm not going to have that conviction in drafting briefs. I'm not going to have that conviction if I'm in chambers talking with the judge. I'm not going to have that conviction if I'm on the record in open court. So building trust with your attorney can make a huge difference in the outcome of your case just because of the level of comfort that we can operate with.
And you also find that when and I'm sure this has been your experience too, that when you are forthright with a judge over a client making a mistake, but how they seek to mitigate it or remedy the situation or whatever it is, that judge, normally what I've seen is a judge they give mercy. That's going to happen. If you're dodgy and you don't answer, or you for lack of a better term, mealy-mouth about it, as opposed to just stepping up to the plate, I think you lose respect to the court. And I think the judge looks at whatever comes out of your mouth after that as with some real discernment that might not go in your favor.
Yeah, I tell a lot of clients when there'll be a bad fact, they made a mistake. I was like, okay, well, we're gonna lead with that. We're gonna say, hey, I made a mistake. This happened. And they'll be like, well, what if they aren't going to say it? What if they aren't going to bring it up? That's going to build instant credibility. And let's be honest, when we're talking about the standard being the best interest of the child, and it's going to, if it devolves into it, it's going to turn into trashing the other parent, it's going to come up. But we've been able to take the sting and frame it how we want to frame it, whether it's you've recovered from that, fixed the problem, it's extremely old. We'll be able to frame it exactly how we want to frame it to take the sting out of it.
Exactly. And if a person has, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's domestic violence in there is help that people can seek out. And by seeking out that help before they're made to seek it out, and then actually showing change, goes a long way with the court system, because you've just relieved the court from having to go through a lengthy process to do those things, whether you be a mother or a father, either one. And one of the biggest things that I've seen is, this is unpopular advice to give to anybody, but I give this to friends as well as to clients. You hear the phrase oftentimes, well, I'm talking to somebody. That's the new phrase, right, of the day.
Uh-huh.
And what I tell everyone is this. I said, divorce or breakup is like death without the closure. And I said, the problem is, I said, you're not emotionally ready to be with anybody. And I think you'll find that right now, blood's in the water and sharks are circling. And here's what I mean by that. Basically, you're going to have a lot of people coming, and the devil doesn't come with a pitchfork and horns. He comes with a nice smile and a nice looking guy or a nice looking girl, right? And you're not ready for that. You're vulnerable. You got to grieve. You got to get past it. And it takes about 6 months to a year from the date it is over before you can do that. I said, anything else is going to mess you up. And I've had more than one client stop by the office after everything's over. You know, they knock on the door and they're like, hey, do you have a minute? Whatnot. I said, hey, meter's not turned on. Come on in. You know, unfortunately, 95% of all the clients I've ever had, I love them. They come by, they're welcome. I love sitting down and having coffee, just chatting with them with a human being. And they'll look at me and they'll say, you remember that advice about sharks in the water? And I just smile. Yeah. And they say, most of them say, you know, I may not have listened to that, but before I got too deep in, I heard your voice go off in my head. I'm like, well, that's good, you know. So that's another thing that I would tell people. Focus on the problem at hand. Get your house in order to where when you do move on, basically history never repeats itself. You're making a better choice. You've got some wisdom from the experience you've been through. And I know that sounds more of the counselor at law than the attorney at law, but I think they go hand in hand in domestic.
Yeah, it amazes me, and I mean, I'm sure you're a lot longer into this than I am, but every single day you hear another story, you hear something that you didn't even know was possible.
Yes,
and you just kind of have to shake your head, and it comes to a point where you're numb and you can take just about anything in stride. But on the getting into relationships issue, my client base is exclusively male.
Gotcha.
And probably 80 to 90% of them are fathers. Gotcha. And so I'm always amazed at the number of men, and not necessarily just clients, but everyone who comes through my office or in COVID world, Zoom or a phone call, that one of their questions when they're ready to file for divorce is, well, can I still have that joint bank account with my girlfriend? Like, about I live with my girlfriend now. And you just kind of in your head, you're like, wait, you just came to me to file for divorce. Mm-hmm. Like, how deep are you into another relationship already?
Yes.
And is it a coping mechanism? Was it just like the next closest warm body to help you get through this process?
Well, to me, the biggest thing that you see with that, and I'm also a registered mediator here in the state, and I mediate both civil and domestic, and I got registered for domestic violence as well. It's amazing to me what I've seen over my career when people do exactly what you're talking about, because here's the thing, it always comes out. Lawyers do their job. They're going to find the paper trail. And when they find the paper trail, you and I both know when there's a longer paper trail to follow or track down, all that means is we lawyers make more money. And that may sound like a really good thing, but I'm sure you agree with me. I would much rather know up front, and I would much rather just deal with it and call it a day, because it's going to be a lot cheaper on the client. It's going to be a lot easier for the judge. It's going to be a lot easier, most importantly, for the children, because you can deal with that and go on. It's when they come to you, like you said, at that last minute, oh, by the way, yeah, that's never a good situation.
Well, the other thing when you come at it, you talk about having that conversation about truthfulness in the beginning.
Yes.
Everybody, and I mean, whether it be in Southern California, whether it be in small town Alabama, whether it be in New York City or the middle of the country, cost is always a factor with an attorney.
Yes.
And if you leave out early in the case major facts, I can guarantee you it's going to cost you exponentially more on the back end, because we're going to have to backtrack and redo a lot of work, re-strategize, rethink our plan of action. So being just 100% blunt, open, and honest, like the question I always ask once I've gotten them talking are, what are the worst 3 things that your ex is going to say about you? And I want to hear in gory detail. Like, what are they going to say about you? Oh, well, they're going to say on the day I hit them, and go into details. And, oh, well, I drink every single night, or I smoke a lot of weed. If we know that on the front end, we can fix those issues. Exactly. If we build a case strategy and start executing on it, and then at court hearing number 3, opposing counsel brings up the argument, all of a sudden we got to go back to block 1 and rebuild your case. Oh, yes.
And the other thing, especially with men, this is a big issue. So many men do not want to report domestic violence when they're the victim. And men, in my opinion, who are raised correctly, don't want to be violent towards their spouse if their spouse is female. But what we're seeing on the rise is in same-sex marriages, domestic violence is more prevalent and less reported. And we cannot be afraid to have those conversations and make sure that people are being safe. We just had someone tried in the next county over. One of the most horrible situations I've ever heard of. There was a protection from abuse in place. The gentleman had been, I think, charged with domestic violence, killed the family, killed the wife, killed the children, on and on. 6 years to get him convicted. And the thing is, if there's domestic violence, I think the one thing that we as attorneys have to tell the men who may be the victim, we have to tell them, look, you can't stay where you are. Where can you go that's safe? But our society, we think, well, you're a man, you're supposed to be able to protect yourself or whatever else. I don't care if you're a 6'8", 325-pound lineman, in those states like Alabama, where we believe in the right to carry your firearm, a woman can shoot you dead just as easily as a man can. And it's a real concern. And we've got to make sure as attorneys, I think, that we're making men comfortable in stating any victim, really. I mean, but I know the show is oriented towards men, but men have to be comfortable in stating if that's going on and not be afraid to come forward or feel that they're going to be looked at oddly. I mean, it's an important issue no matter who the victim is.
Yeah, and I think the point on that, men in reporting domestic violence, I had a mentor, Bob Bradley, who the statistic he would always cite was that men will be victims of domestic violence, physical domestic violence, 15 times before they report, and women will be victims of domestic violence between 6 and 7 times before they report. So no one's reporting it right away, but men are waiting almost twice as long. And there's a Harvard study out there that shows that says that based on their research, 70% of domestic violence was perpetuated by the woman in the relationship. So we know it's happening, but I see a lot from my clients where there'll be clear domestic violence, there'll be clear issues, whether they have video evidence of it, whether there's proof, there's significant proof of it, and the man won't want to pursue that avenue. And I'm starting to think it has something to do with almost the biology of men, where we're designed to be the protectors. And even though that relationship's on the rocks, as a man, they feel like, I still need to protect this woman. She's still a good mom. I can't do this to her. Where the women, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to jump in there for just a second because you raised a wonderful point. I think we have to shift the mindset to, it's not about her. It's not about you. It's about protecting that child. Because clearly, if one parent is being violent, even if the child is just in the next room or down the hall or whatever else, it affects that child. And it will affect how that child views things in the future, to relationships that they themselves form. And if we change the mindset by getting them to think that, look, this just isn't about you, it's about the child you want to raise. And if we get that mind shift, I was hoping that protector, like you said, that instinctual protection is extended to their child. And look, you're not trying to say what a hateful, awful person she is. You're trying to protect your child.
Yeah, so true.